All right, so the very first thing that comes to my mind when I talk about triceps is it is something a little different that's more driven by experience and not anything I've read anywhere. The way you sequence your exercises for triceps are going to make a big deal, particularly as it results to elbow injuries. One of the things I've seen over the years is a lot of people have trouble with their triceps because their elbows are always hurt. And one of the things when I started lifting in the 80s that I saw everybody doing was very heavy skull crushers and lying extension type exercises to kick off their workout. Of course, I tried that. That's what all the big guys were doing. I always had some swelling in my elbows. I remember the days when I'd bend my arm and I looked like an egg stuck in my elbow. So at some point, I decided, you know what? Maybe it's not a good idea to start with a skull crusher lying extension type movement. Any skull crushers or even an overhead version, I think are very hard on your tricep or your elbow. And if your elbows are always banged up and hurting, you will not get good triceps. Okay, so what we want to start with is a push down variation, as I feel those are about the easiest you can get on your triceps. That's number one, and that is absolutely huge and very underrated. Okay, speaking of push downs, let's start with push downs, more specifically your range of motion. So I want you to watch me on this. What I see with a lot of people is a push down that looks like this. And that's not a bad thing. It's more of a partial range of motion. But what I like to see people do is let their wrists come up higher so that they're actually getting more range of motion on their triceps, okay? So you see how my forearm is up, smashing against my bicep here, as opposed to just coming here. Now, you got to be careful that when you come up, you don't just rest. You want to keep tension on the tricep. But I personally like that range of motion when I'm coming all the way up so I can stretch the belly of the tricep out a little better. So one thing I want you to think about is just simply letting your wrist come up. Now let's follow that up with, where do you push down? Do you push down in front, straight down, behind you? Again, all those things potentially work, but what I like to do is I like to think of, where am I applying the force? Kind of how am I lined up? And I feel like if you're pushing straight down, you're keeping all the tension on your tricep. What I see a lot of people do is particularly when they get to a heavier weight, they start turning this into a little bit of a lat exercise. So they start this, like this, and then they get a little bit of tricep, but it's so much lat. I would rather see you push straight down. I very rarely see people pushing straight down in the gym, but this is my favorite direction to push, which it's just straight down. So I'm standing back. The tension is on my triceps right now. It's already starting to burn just from holding it, and I'm just driving straight down, okay? You don't need to snap and lock your elbows out real hard, just nice and smooth. Tension's on your triceps. Notice I didn't stop right here. Notice I came up and stretched. Look in a mirror if you can when you're doing those, and just make sure you're coming straight down. Number 4, and another just personal thing I like from experience, I have no scientific evidence to back this up. I like to do push downs with spongy grips. Now this one's pretty soft. I like this one. I don't like the metal grips when I do these. But if you remember on any of my bicep videos, you might have seen me do a preacher curl with dumbbells, where I'm smashing them together as I curl. Well, this is very similar. So I'm doing a push down. I'm not really smashing them together, but I'm keeping them together. So there's something about having a little grip that's kind of spongy that really, really, I feel, it's almost like I can feel it deeper in the long head of my tricep. Even though it's a push down, which you would typically think is more for the lateral head of your tricep, because that's essentially what that lateral head does, it just extends your arm. I feel he's actually digging into the long head. So I'm a huge fan of these spongy grip push downs. Again, range of motion, right? Straight down. But and then if you want to, if your wrists are free to move, so, your wrist might move a little, that's okay. But this right here feels awesome to me. One of the things that I saw a lot when I started training at World Gym on East Livingston in Columbus, Ohio in the 90s, back before it became the bingo place, we used to do these close grip type push downs with this style right here, where you would lean into it. And what you were trying to do is use your chest. It wasn't a tricep exercise, it was kind of an upper body exercise. So you're using your triceps, your chest, your shoulders, you're loading the whole stack up. But I think there's a better way if you want to use an exercise to really load your triceps. And later in the 90s, I went to Westside Barbell, and this is where I learned that. So we're going to walk over to a bench now, and I want to show you a little better alternative if you want to really load up the heavy weight for your triceps. All right, next tip. So we've done our push down, we got our elbows warmed up, and now you want a good meat and potatoes exercise that's going to really bulk up your triceps. I mentioned that I trained at Westside. Some of those guys had phenomenal triceps. There's Kenny Patterson, George Halbert, Chuck Vogelpool, certainly. Those guys were awesome. Dave Tate had massive triceps. All those guys did real heavy pen presses. The advantage to this is, you know, when you get to the bottom of a bench press, it's mostly, we'll say, chest for the most part. And you're weaker there than your lockout. But if you just focus on the lockout, you can direct a lot of stress to your triceps and with a heavy weight. So it's more specific to your triceps, and your chest is not a limiting factor. So what we do for our bulking exercise, well, they're all bulking, but what we do for our good meat and potatoes exercise is we do a pin press. It looks like this. So you set pins up. This is why it's called a pin press. You set the pins up here. By the way, this is one of my favorite exercises. I absolutely love these. So you're not going to do them wide. You're going to do them in a little closer. Okay. So you're a little closer, and you're just locking out with your tricep. You're squeezing the bar. Another thing that they always told me at Westside Barbell was to really squeeze the bar hard. So squeeze the bar and lock out with your triceps. Pause. Boom, lock out. Boom, lock out. Boom, lock out. And one of the things you can do too is you can just kind of play around with the height. You can do a little shorter range of motion, whatever it takes for you to really feel it in your triceps. Sometimes I start too low and I start feeling in my pecs, so I just move the pins up a little bit. So rather than using that kind of that push down where you're using your whole body, I would much rather you see you work a lockout, a pin press, heavy for your triceps. And again, your elbows are warmed up, so you're not going to hurt yourself using heavy weight. This is a great approach for longevity. And then the next tip would be, just generally speaking, a close grip bench press in range of motion. A lot of people program close grip bench presses in for their triceps. And the problem again is their chest. There's so much chest work involved, they can't really focus on their triceps. So if you limit your range of motion to what we're doing on a pen press here, it's going to be much more effective for your triceps. So use the pen press for a bulking movement, and then think range of motion. A close grip bench press, although it's a great exercise, if your problem specifically is your triceps are lagging, I'd much rather see you do this than a full range of motion close grip bench press where your chest is probably going to fatigue and limit your ability to use a lot of weight. So, hey, one other just kind of side note I was thinking about before I walked off here. Some people might not have these. I try to tailor these videos to the basic equipment so you can all get the advantages of it. A floor press, just laid on the ground, is another alternative way to do these. So you can lay on the ground, just do a floor press. You've probably seen people do those. Okay, next tip. Another great second movement for meat and potatoes is dips, dip variations. I love them, always have. Now, if you've been watching a lot of my videos, you'll see me doing these with a wide grip. And they kind of look like this. So I'm out here, I got my feet in front of me, and I'm dipping like this. Okay? That's for chest, that's more chest. But what if you want to use these for triceps? So normally, if I'm going to use them for triceps, you're going to see me change my form. Now I'm going to face this way, and rather than letting my elbows flare out, they're going to come more, instead of in this way, they're going to come more backwards. And what I try to think of in my head when I'm doing a dip is I try to think I'm going to push this into the ground. So So I'm not so wide, okay? I'm not real wide, I'm closer. I'm in here, I'm not out there, okay? And I'm feeling weak today, so I'm gonna use the assist here. So instead of my elbows going out, they're coming back, okay? Range of motion. You're doing just fine if you come down halfway. If you come down right here, that's good. And again, push down into the bar, try to drive it into the ground. Okay? If I start going all the way down like this, that's okay, but now I'm engaging a lot of chest. And the reason why you're watching this video is you're trying to work more on triceps. So I want you to modify the range of motion so that it's more intense on your triceps. So elbows back, and drive your hands through the little pole here. This is also something I like to do with a real good smooth tempo. You don't want to get sloppy ever, but you particularly don't want to get sloppy on something like a dip. But you'll hurt your shoulder, you'll hurt your elbow, you'll definitely hurt something. Now, if you don't have one of those assist machines, there is an old school technique. They're called dips between benches, where you put your feet up on a bench and do dips. But you don't even have to do that. You don't even have to put your feet up. You can just do it like this. What I would caution you on here is it's a little bit risky on your shoulders when you get down really low into that position. I'm not a big fan of that position. I am okay with these if you want to come down about right here, about halfway and squeeze. That's okay, but when you start seeing your shoulders, see what my shoulders are doing, watch. Good, 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 now watch. You see how they're dipping? I'm not a fan of that. That feels very uncomfortable. So this is, you gotta be real precise if you want to use this version of a dip or you'll hurt yourself. So bench dips are okay, but you gotta really limit that range of motion, specifically that kind of rotation in your shoulder.
Hi, I'm Alexander. I'm going to show you guys ripcord.
Now, as you move on to your next exercise, we've done a push down variation and we've done a real meat and potatoes type heavy movement like a pin press, floor press, or the dip. At this point, you should have a pretty good amount of blood in your elbows, or excuse me, your triceps, and your elbows should be warmed up. Now you put in the lying extensions. The lying extensions are now going to be much safer, not going to tear your elbows up. And what I really like about the lying extensions is it gives you the ability to really stretch your tricep out. Now, the long head of your tricep, that's the kind of the inner part inside there. It's a little bit more unique in the way it attaches to the back of your shoulder, whereas the other ones don't. So if you want to put a really good stretch on it, there's a couple ways to do it. One way is actually with the push down, which we're going to get to. The other way is anytime your humerus is kind of lifted. You know, I should mention that a lot of times people think you can isolate a head of your tricep, like you can isolate your lateral head, you can isolate your long head, isolate the medial head. You can't really isolate the head. You can't shut everything else off. You're just trying to bias a little bit more of the muscle action in one of the heads. But I'm not trying to tell you guys that if you do a push down, it's only going to work the lateral head, or it's only going to work the long head, or it's only going to work the medial head. None of these exercises exclusively isolate. Anyways, I'm getting off track. So I like an extension because of the stretch I can get now. And there's nothing better than getting an awesome pump in a movement, pushing some weight, and then stretching the muscle. What I like to do in lying extensions is I actually like to use a kettlebell. Now, what I like about these is if you look at my wrist, with a dumbbell, I would be right here, okay? With a kettlebell, I'm right here. Also, look at the width of the kettlebell. It's pretty narrow. So I can come in and get a nice stretch right here. Now, I like this grip because I feel like I can really stretch the tricep good with it, right in the belly of the tricep. If I tried out with a dumbbell, I'd smash my face. And I would get even goofier looking than I already am. So, if that's possible. So, right here. Now, let's say you want to stretch even more. come down, and even you can even let your elbows start to ride up a little bit. That's okay. That's even more stretch. All right? And by the way, another tip while I'm down here is, you remember when we were talking about push downs and how I like to keep that straight line of force? Same thing here. Straight up and straight down. Because when you start coming back this way, you're losing tension on your triceps. So straight up. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're doing their lying extensions. They do too much of this, swinging and losing tension. Keep the tension right on your triceps, right here, straight up and down. Straight up and down. Okay? Now, if you're creative, you could somehow hook a band up, and then you could push against the band. I've seen Jeff Cavalier do that. I thought that was what's the word? Ingenuity. That showed a lot of ingenuity. I thought that was really cool. We used to do these also at Westside with chains. So as you got, those were with a barbell, but as you got up higher, the chains would get heavier and it would make the load heavier. But anyways, so straight up and down, right here. Okay, now you may not have kettlebells at your gym. That's okay. So I want to show you a movement that I do like with dumbbells, okay? So one of the reasons I've talked about on triceps, and the reason why they're not growing, is range of motion. A lot of times that happens on lying extensions too, but watch what you can do with a dumbbell when you're laying down. I think this is pretty cool. So first, look at where my hand is. It's at the top of the dumbbell. So what I do is I stretch. I take the dumbbell down to my shoulder. So look at that stretch I've got on my tricep. That's a wicked stretch. So you can take it down like that. And if you want to set them down on the ground, you can even do them explosively. This was a Kenny Patterson favorite, one of the best bench pressers ever in history. Kenny used to do these with like 100-pound dumbbells. It was amazing. So this way, look at that range of motion, stretch, and then kick them up. Right there. Absolutely love these. You thought I hated dumbbells. I don't hate dumbbells. I just like certain tools for each exercise. So now, obviously, that lying down version, I mean lying down really literally on the floor, not on a bench. So you can get that pause if you want it. And it's just a real cool exercise. Once you do a set or two of those, I think you'll enjoy it. So you may have noticed I didn't do an overhead movement. I find these incredibly uncomfortable. Okay, so a dumbbell this way, it just feels very uncomfortable. It doesn't feel natural. The stretch doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a good choice for me. I've hurt my shoulders doing those before, which probably plays into my reason for not liking them. You could do, if you want, you could do a one-arm version. That's okay. Again, I would save these until the end, but I would probably avoid the heavy dumbbell ones if you have any kind of shoulder tightness at all. Now, I get my shoulders worked on every week. I get a lot deep tissue work. I have very flexible shoulders. You can see the rotation there, and they still don't feel real good for me. I think as you get bigger and you get more muscle mass up to here, it's a very difficult exercise. I'm not a big fan of those. Not saying it's a bad exercise for everybody, but I think there's better choices. I think the dumbbell moves and the kettlebell moves I showed you are, in my opinion, they're a little better, they're easier on your joints, and they're more on your triceps. So, all right, so you may think I don't like overhead extensions, but I don't mind them. I would just use a cable, or actually a rope and a cable, if I were going to do them. So now in this gym, we don't have one of the little benches with a back support. That's what I would want you to do. I would want you to sit down and have your back supported when you do these. So just pretend there's a magical seat here with my back supported. So these I actually really do like. So we come overhead. Now look at this nice stretch you're getting. I got a little freedom of movement here, which I don't have with a dumbbell. Okay, a nice stretch and up. These are phenomenal. And look at that stretch. Beautiful exercise. I love these. Great exercise, overhead rope extension. I program these into all my my training programs for people because I love this exercise. Okay. Now, while we're on the cable here, I want to show you something else. So let's move this up. Do you remember earlier when I said the long head, the inner part of your tricep has worked a lot like this, but there's another way it's also worked? It's also worked by this dual rope push down. You could put this in the beginning of the workout with the other push downs, or you could even put it in the end. Honestly, I'd probably put it in the beginning. But since we're talking a little bit more about the long head of your tricep, I want to talk about it now. The way you really hit that inner head on this exercise is you just got to have your elbows up and you got to get full extension. So something like this, okay? And if you didn't have the dual rope, you wouldn't be able to pull it back. It would like stop right here. So the dual rope gives you the advantage of being able to get back into full extension. So right here. And these absolutely crush your triceps. Another one of my favorite movements. So use 2 ropes, okay, and get back into full extension. And again, notice my elbows aren't here. I want your elbows back, okay? So keep your elbows back. I'm still getting a full range of motion. See how I'm letting my arm come up? Let my arm come up, boom. Stretch, contract. But keep that, don't let your elbows start to drift down. Unless you want to do a cool little superset. You could go to failure, then you could let them drift down, you could do that. That'd be okay. Anyways, this dual rope push down is another awesome variation for the long head of your tricep. So you don't just, your only option isn't to just overhead. All right, I want to talk about another concept here, and this whole notion of reverse grip. I'm personally not a big fan of it. Mainly because it doesn't feel good on your wrists. You'll even have a lot of forearm fatigue where you can't really use much weight on these. And there's no real benefit with doing this over this. This is putting you in a stronger position. I just don't see a huge benefit. I can see how your elbows are lined up a little better so you can just bring your arms straight down. But again, you're putting like all your pressure right here on your kind of right here. If you crank and you really grip it hard, you can do it, but I just think it puts you in a really weak position. I don't know anybody can do much weight this way. I'm just not a big fan of those. So even if you use a single cable, even the spongy grip, which I love, I probably would not use too many of these, if at all. I just think there's much better alternatives in this exercise. Maybe if you're just working on your mind-muscle connection, you're warming up, and you just want to feel your triceps, that's okay. But generally speaking, just not a big fan of reverse grip work. Okay, let me give you a little tip on tricep kickbacks too. There's a version that I started doing maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, where I do the kickback pronated, okay? So instead of doing like that, I'm actually doing it like this. It gets more your medial head and long head, so you'll feel your whole tricep working more. And by the way, if you're looking for something to really pump your triceps, really jam blood in there, this is a great exercise to do that. Just keep your arms, your humerus up, and just flex, okay? Okay, and our last tip, which actually could be the best one of all. Look, I know we're into these push-pull programs, and I love them. I've designed many of them. But if your triceps are really lagging, I wouldn't just do an exercise or two after the end of the chest. I would actually build in a separate bicep and tricep arm day. A separate arm day will give you a lot of focus. You'll train them when you're fresh. And I would do them first before your biceps. So a separate arm day programmed in, triceps first. And I think just that focus alone will help a ton of people. I know a lot of times when I do push-pull, by the time I get done with chest and shoulders, there's nothing left in my tris. So I'll literally do one exercise, maybe two, but I'll certainly never do three, two max.